Hello everyone and welcome back to episode 84 of Random Thoughts. I'm joined this week again by Speedy Gonzalez.
Speedy Gonzalez.
James, cheers. So, some context. We've got some timing gates at the moment. We've borrowed a pair, a set, and we've been testing 5-minute sprints. We're really looking at acceleration.
Yeah, big theme this month for track time.
Yeah, it's all about that first few steps, and we're measuring 5-minute speed and seeing if we can improve it. What's your time, James?
0.912 seconds for 5 meters. Yeah, it is the time to beat so far this month. We've only just started though. It's
we're only a third of the way through the month.
Yep.
But we were thinking, and this is your idea, was that we were thinking it'd be a great opportunity to talk about acceleration and how important it is for sport, and how it's probably in a lot of ways more important than top end speed, more important than vertical leap, and probably in a lot of sports only comes second to like lateral agility in terms of most important characteristics you can have in your athlete.
It's applicable across so many different sports and disciplines as well. Just your ability to be explosive off the mark is just huge.
Where do you want to start?
I think the best place to start, obviously we want to teach people how to become more explosive, but the best place to start would be the things that are stopping you today, like the handbrakes.
The handbrakes, okay. Yeah. So the limitations to acceleration.
Yeah. Before you can start getting strong, you have to make sure the system is working properly.
Well, yeah, that was different to what I was going to think. What I was thinking was like the first limitation is a lack of strength.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about basketballers, footballers, soccer players, netballers, hockey, rugby, whatever your sport might be, so you ran a 0.912. Mine was pretty average. I think it was 1.19. I just snuck under the 1.2 mark. But the thing that was letting me down, the thing that I felt was the biggest limit when it came to the acceleration, was I just couldn't push the ground hard enough.
Yeah.
I was like, and you slow-mo videoed it, I looked fine, and Neil was like, everything looks good, I don't know what to change. But the thing is, like, it feels like I'm weak.
Yeah.
It literally feels like you're weak and you can't push the ground hard enough.
Your brain, you have the movement skill, your brain knows what you want it to do, and it's sending the signal down to the muscle, but you just can't put enough force into the ground to push you fast enough.
So I can't so from a neural point of view, you either can't send enough signals fast enough, or you can't recruit the motor units at a high enough level, or you can't recruit them quick enough to send multiple contractions, and there's a system breakdown, whether it's at the brain, at the nerves, or at the muscles that just can't, or even at the tendons as well. Tendons are a massive. Your tendons, while they don't contract, your muscles contract through the tendon and create the stiffness to move the joint. So if your tendons are weak or not very
grumpy, inflamed, things
like that, or just you're generally weak and you're not very adapted to sprint training, they won't be able to pick up that slack quickly and become locked down and tense.
Yeah. So your ability to remain stiff through movement.
Yeah. I hate that word stiff. It's kind of like it's that springiness, that ability to react to the stretch short cycle quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's your first limit, is lack of strength. What were you
so handbrake's the big one the big few that I like to touch on when I'm talking running technique with athletes are hip flexors and thoracic mobility. I think hip flexors is the big one, the big rock. It is the handbrake on the glutes, the handbrake to extension through the hips.
Yeah, and it's both acute and chronic in that if you have tight hip flexors during your 5-meter sprint test, your 10-meter sprint test, whatever it might be, you won't be able to extend the hip fully to push the ground for the maximum range of motion, because your hip flexor will reciprocally inhibit your glutes. But also long term, if you've got chronically tight hip flexors, that pulls you into the anterior tilt of the pelvis, so your pelvis rotates forward, your back becomes arched, and your glutes chronically live in a position of poor activation as well.
Biomechanical disadvantage, they just can't do the work as well.
So that means when you're doing your running training, your glutes aren't taking maximum advantage of that strength training.
Yeah. And the issue with it as well is we're tightening our hip flexors all the time. And we're sitting
we're sitting at a desk.
We've talked about sitting a lot on Random Thoughts as well, and just making sure you're getting range through those hips so you can use the glutes. Big first step.
And if you look at the acceleration is an interesting one. It's as much quad dominant as is glute dominant. The further you run, the more it becomes glute dominant. But the thing is, you need so glutes are part of your posterior chain, including your spinal erectors, your glutes, your hamstrings, and your calves. You need a good posterior chain, so those muscles I just mentioned, in order to allow your anterior chain, your quads, in particular your hip flexors, to do their work. Yeah. So you look at the EMG studies when it comes to acceleration versus top speed. Acceleration seems to be a lot more quad dominant. But if you don't have a good, strong working posterior chain, particularly glutes and calves, then you won't be able to create good shapes. And we always talk about making good angles and good body angles and alignment. We'll talk about that more in a second. If you can't create those shapes and those positions, then you can't use the quads.
Can't
use the quads to push the ground
to do the work. The way I like to explain it to the athletes when I'm taking through their consult and their running technique
is their testing and stuff like that.
Yeah, we measure glute activate, we test glute activation, make sure the glutes can actually fire into hip extension properly, like in muscle memory.
And sequencing with the hamstrings.
Yeah, and I say to them, if the glutes aren't doing their job, it's going to put stress on every other structure in the body. It's the biggest muscle in the human body. It's a primary mover in hip extension. You're not using it for its primary role. And so everything else is going to have to do a little bit more work. And so each muscle, each joint has its own job description. And if it does more, if it's doing more than that, you're asking it to do more than that, it's going to get stressed, it's going to get tight, it's going to get grumpy, and possibly injured. And
particularly groins and hamstrings are the big two, and lower backs as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's just
spot on.
Yeah, the glutes, the posterior chain allows the quads and allows all the other muscles to do their job properly and focus on their role in sprinting and acceleration.
Nice.
Yeah.
Now you mentioned thoracic.
Yeah, I think it's a big one with arm drive. Now I just thought of this one yesterday, and we recorded Ben and Robbie doing their acceleration.
Yep. Who are not faster than James. He won't admit it, but.
Pretty rounded up, and Meg as well, pretty rounded up through the thoracic. And you have a poor thoracic position, it's the foundation your shoulder blade works off. Poor thoracic position, poor arm drive, and that neural connection between arm drive and knee drive, even though it's only 5 meters, if you can get a really powerful drive with that elbow straight back, that allows that knee to come through with a bit of power, and it's just a few steps. So
yeah, I've been watching our athletes, and the big thing that I notice is 2 big things. One, they only really run a 4-meter sprint, and so it's like, you've stopped before the gate. Like, so we've got timing gates. You have to break that last gate and then slow down. And what I'm noticing is they'll do 3 really awesome steps. They'll get out of the gate beautifully.
Yep.
And then they switch off before they're broken. It's like, no, you just took 1/10 of a second off your time. And in 5 minutes, 1/10 of a second is massive. And then the second thing is they're not throwing their arms hard enough.
Yeah.
We use the cue. I'm not sure where we got this one, but like you want to be swing your arms like you're throwing spaghetti behind you at the wall.
It's a great one.
You want to be throwing spaghetti into the wall behind you as you go, and aggressively and violently doing it, because that will help drive your knee drive. Better arm drive, better knee drive, put you in a good position to then punch your feet and punch a good drive into the ground to propel you forwards.
Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned thoracic. So Meg, Ben, and Robbie, they all have pretty good mobility and body awareness.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's as much for them thoracic range of motion, but also thoracic strength and like sort of back planking type strength in that position. Because Nick Winkelman's quote, Nick Winkelman's an American strength and conditioning coach, he talks about head to heel strong as steel. So you want a straight line from the back of your head to the back of your ankle, and so your body as you go out and those first few steps, you're over that 45-degree angle, but it's a straight line through the back of your body. And so if they hunch forward through their ribs, trying to like will more power out of themselves somehow, they're compromising that position.
I feel it throws the core out as well, so it's having a harder time doing its job to stabilize the pelvis as the glutes trying to pull down on the pelvis. So could be a link there as well.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't think it's a mobility issue with Meg and Robbie, and that I think it's maybe just a positional. And none of us are really sprinters.
Robbie is. Robbie's done a bit of long jump stuff.
There's a few stuff, but I think just cueing into that position would really be beneficial as well. Yeah.
And wall drills are really beneficial for that.
Yeah.
Getting up against the wall, practicing good position, getting into, and then the little fall and run type drills as well. Teach you a good alignment and teach you how to be head up. A sprinter friend of mine explained that you want to imagine there's a string pulling your head up. So pulling your head like it's string going, a piece of string is through your entire spine. It's being pulled up, but kind of out at the same time. So it's not straight up; it's out on that angle, and you kind of your whole body, your rib cage, and your head is following that line.
Yeah, that body angle is hugely important too, and keeping it in acceleration. Yeah,
nice. The third mobility thing, so glutes and hip flexors.
Yep.
So hip flexor mobility, glute activation, thoracic range of motion for posture, for arm drive, core stability. The third one would be dorsiflexion.
Yes.
If you don't have good ankle range of motion, that's what dorsiflexion is, when you bring your toes up towards the front of your shin. If you don't have good dorsiflexion range, then you're not going to be able to spring and load the calf, which is probably the second, or quads, glutes, calves, I don't know how you would rank them, but one of the most important muscles in the entire body when it comes to sprinting and acceleration is your calf.
And that reactive ability as well.
If you can't load the calf with good dorsiflexion, you can't get it sprung early before you hit the ground, you're going to waste time on the ground, or you're going to put the foot in the poor position, whether a toe strike or a flat foot strike, not on the midfoot.
Yeah. Absolutely. We see all the time with our juniors that they just don't load the calves when they run.
No.
They'll want to reach out with a heel strike, so that calf is hugely deconditioning doing any sort of reactive work.
They're kind of decelerating themselves with every step on that heel strike. We've talked about heel strike before as well.
And then we try and get them to do a max effort sprint, and the calf's just not ready for the loading, and it just won't be able to perform as well.
So that's our mobility stuff.
Yeah, I think they're the handbrakes.
Yeah. Should we talk about what we're seeing in our athletes? We mentioned a couple, but what we're seeing with our tests this week.
Yeah.
What are you seeing in some of the better performers? What are they doing right? The James Cheerses of our group.
Well, it's the where they finish is pushing through that last gate. So they have the gate starting at the start of track time. When I do my sprint, I can run all the way through the wall. It's like I've got a lot of speed to sort of dissipate before I can stop.
So it's really a 7 or an 8 meter sprint.
Yeah.
In order to ensure we get that gate.
The second biggest one I see is picking up too early. Just not keeping that body angle and sort of like, yep, I've pushed off the line, now I'm picking up and cruising.
So they're transitioning to top speed mechanics before they're really at top speed. So they're not, because acceleration and top speed, the way I kind of explain it is, top speed is beautiful, it's smooth, it's effortless. You watch Usain Bolt, you watch a Southern Power, when they're running at top speed, or even the 400 meters like Van Niekerk and stuff like that, they're just flying.
They're pushing as hard as they can, but it looks so effortless.
No, well, they're not pushing too hard though, because this is one thing, it's effortless. Yeah. It's all about rhythm and time. Once you're at top speed, it's all about rhythm and timing. So I've done sprints at a track or something like that. I was like, I'm running so fast. If I just work a little bit harder, I could run faster. And then you slow yourself down because you tighten up. So it's all about that rhythmic cycling of the legs. Whereas acceleration, 0 to 5, 0 to 10, it's all about that big push. It's all about attacking the ground and being aggressive and sort of driving into the ground, because it's a lot more force dependent. It's a lot less elastic, a lot more force and power driven.
Any other big mistakes you see from athletes? Arm
drive, like I mentioned before.
Yeah.
That's a big one. And then, like you were saying, that rising up too early, because they're not. You got to work a bit. Yeah. For 0 to 5, sometimes it's a little bit messy, but you got to work. You got to drive a bit. You got to grind into it to get those.
Starting arm position is one I just thought of as well. Making sure that whichever if your left leg's out in front, making sure that your arms are like right back.
And opposites,
and right back, so if right from the beginning, it can throw through and drive that knee forward.
Yeah. So if we're doing a 2-point start version.
Yep.
So if you are left leg forward, right leg back, you want to be pretty compact with your legs, and you want to be low and bent. So you want to be as low in, so your hips are down, so your glutes are preloaded and pre-sprung. And then so left leg forward, right arm forward, left arm aggressively behind you.
Yeah,
so
back.
When you do that big push to that left front foot, it's a drive, and the arms throw aggressively to get that knee drive happening. To create as much momentum as quickly as possible. Yeah. That's the things. Let's talk about training for 5 meter. So we've got our athletes have 20 days left to beat their times. We're tracking times as we go, so hopefully we'll get some good befores and afters. So we talk about mobility, we talk about strength. What sort of things do we think we need to be working on to improve? And 5 minutes is so important. Every sport, your ability to create separation from an opponent, lateral ability, and deceleration and re-acceleration sort of ability. So footy, soccer, basketball, netball, all these sports, such confined spaces that you need to be able to break clearances, create tackles, deny an opponent's space. All those kind of things are dependent on those first 3 steps. So what do we need to do to improve those?
I just love the core lift.
Core lift.
Yeah. Can you load the core? It's a great shape. It's loading that triple extension, and you can get a really good drive through with the hips.
Maximum neuromuscular strength, and in such a specific position like your core lift.
Yeah.
I remember, so Exos is one of the world's best strength and conditioning companies. They're based in America. They do a lot of athletes for the NFL Combine. I remember they do with the NFL guys, because these are athletes that with the 40-yard dash, if you take their time down by 1/10 of a second or whatever it might be, you can add millions of dollars to their first paycheck and move them up significant portions of the draft just by changing those stats.
And they go through these big training camps just to get those minute but huge improvements.
The big rock of their strength work they do, a lot of track and field stuff and a lot of sled type work on the field and on the track. But what they do in the gym is a blocked or a rack pull with a trap bar.
Yeah.
So it's a partial range of motion trap bar deadlift, or a core lift as we call it, and heavy. They go super, super heavy and just load it up, but not so much range. It's just that ability to pop, bang, and hit the weight really, really aggressively.
Yeah. And so with junior athletes, we want to get all of our junior athletes to a position where they can load that core lift right up. But it's all about doing it safely and doing it properly, teaching them how to move properly, making sure all those handbrakes are taken care of so they're loading the positions safely, and then gradually getting strong so it's not sort of overloading the system too much in one hit.
Yeah, with the NFL Combine, you've got an athlete for maybe 6 or 8 weeks.
Yeah.
And we're talking about millions of dollars and potentially draft or no draft type talk here. When you've got an athlete like we do for months and years
So
at
it's
a time.
a training age of 0.
We start from an actual chronological age of 15 or 16. We've got 3 or 4 years before they go to college or before they go to pros or anything like that. So we've got time to build up to that same situation, and so you want to take that by getting your shapes right, make sure. I watched some videos about that NFL stuff. They still lift beautifully. Like, there's nothing ugly about it. They are lifting beautiful positions, nice shapes, good hip drive, but they're just going heavy. So, and like they bring up the range so you can go heavier. So it's more about the neural adaptation than the muscular adaptation.
Yeah, heavy is something that has to be earned though. You can't rush your way to it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then I suppose the other components are strength, so core lift, back squat, front squat.
Yep.
We prefer the back squat.
Hip thrust. What are the stats on hip thrust for acceleration?
Great point. Argel mentioned, so one of our coaches, Argel, mentioned vector-specific training. Argel, I have to grab the link off you. I believe it's vector-specific training. So the core lift and the squat are very much a vertical vector. So that means when you lift the weight, you're going up. Your body's moving up. So they're very highly correlated to vertical leap and things like that. The hip thrust or loaded glute bridge seems to be better related to sprinting stuff because it's horizontal vector. You're moving, even though you're lying down, your body is moving forwards and backwards relative to the weight. Kind of like sled work.
Yeah.
So sled stuff, sled pulls, sled pushes, and hip thrusting seems to be more horizontal vector. He mentioned a study. I don't remember the stats. I don't remember what they.
I remember seeing it. He goes into the workboard. Yeah, I remember seeing it.
But the moral of the story is you want to incorporate some of that horizontal based stuff into your training as well. So the vectors seems to be like, we talk about muscle specificity, shape and movement pattern specificity, vector specificity seems, and like load and velocity specificity, vector specificity, say that 10 times in a sentence, seems to be the next sort of frontier when we look at these things. So things like Kaiser machines, like hydraulic air pressure machines, as opposed to just normal free weights, things like the flywheel, stuff like that might become the future, where you're doing as much of your strength training sort of forwards and backwards through your hips and through your legs as you are up and down, as a way of sort of a novel. I think that might be part of the future though. I think that might be a little bit off as far as the research is concerned.
Yeah, that's cool stuff though.
Very cool.
All of that is hip extension or like focused primary mover hip extension.
Explosive hip extension,
core work as well. So when we teach the interns about core work and the athletes about core work, the core is a cylinder that is designed to resist motion, so it can transfer force. You can transfer force through the body. Yeah,
it's a transfer position. It's a take the force from the ground up through the legs, through the core into the upper body, or the other way around, from the arms down into the legs, vice versa.
So you think about sprinting. If you could have the strongest legs in the world, your glutes could be insanely powerful. But if every time your glute is trying to push into extension, it's not just pulling the femur back, it's also pulling the pelvis down. You're leaking huge amounts of energy.
So if your core's not strong from the top, you'll leak energy into the core as opposed to holding it rigid. And part of your core is always your glute med. So glute max and quads for extension explosiveness, but glute med for stability. So if you're pulling on that pelvis from the top, from the glute max, glute med's not doing its job of stabilizing the pelvis, in the frontal plane.
Frontal plane.
Yep. If you're wobbling all over the place, you're leaking energy.
I can't remember the last time I screened an athlete on running technique and didn't see that Trendelenburg
where they're like shimmying through stuff.
Like that glute med is just doing absolutely nothing. And it's a huge energy leak. It's just because nothing can pull in the right way when your hips are so out of line. Yeah, so it's a big one too.
And then I suppose the last part of the acceleration puzzle would be your movement technique and actual skill and technique.
Yeah, it's a skill. Acceleration is a skill. You have to practice to get better at it. I
think number one is your arm drive.
Yep.
Getting a good arm swing.
Yeah.
If you get a good arm swing and you learn how to put your foot and we talk about triple extension power, so driving into the ground with your quads, glutes and calves. But I think triple flexion position and learning to get into a good triple flexion where you've got the hip flexed, the knees flexed, and the foot is sprung up into dorsiflexion. So the foot is up, so you can then spring that into the ground. I think that's the most important technical factor, so that you can then create power and get a good body angle and push into the ground.
Get into that top position. To explode.
That allows you to use your strength that you've developed.
Yeah. Love it. Yeah. Anything we've missed?
I've got a bunch of videos. We've got a bunch of videos linked to acceleration. We've got some talking about mid-foot strike. We've got some talking about heel strike. There's lots of cues, lots of tips, how to improve your arm drive, all those kind of things are linked onto our YouTube. You mentioned sitting and mobility, so I'll link to those as well. I've got some videos on how to increase your hip flexor flexibility. Hip flexor strength's important as well, but that's usually taken care of just by doing more sprinting.
Yeah, and a word of warning with that, your hip flexors, if you don't do a lot of sprinting and you start doing a lot of sprinting, your hip flexors are going to be incredibly sore.
Yeah, and your obliques too.
Yeah.
I always light up my obliques like crazy whenever I start sprinting again.
So if you're really keen to get out there and start working on your acceleration ability to improve any sport that you're playing, start slow.
Don't start slow for speed.
That was bad wording, wasn't it?
Start low for volume.
Start low volume.
Yeah.
Go fast, but start low volume.
Yeah, so warm up thoroughly, build up the intensity of your running gradually, and then first workout might just be 5-10 meter sprints.
Yeah.
That might be it. That might be your workout done.
That's
and then
a lot.
come back 48 hours later, you might do 8 10-meter sprints, something like that, or 5, so whatever it might be that you're doing. But remember that acceleration, those first few steps, that being aggressive off the line, if you can get that good, like, that's so much more important than say 20s, 40s, 100s, stuff like that. So we tend to measure the longer distances in sport. Those first few steps, that ability to create that change, that separation, that's massive when it comes to team sports.
Yeah. I feel like we need to do a part 2 on deceleration.
Deceleration,
You have all the power in the world, but if you can't control it...
Yeah, because in sport, you hit the gas, you meet a brick wall, you need to hit the brakes so you can then go around that brick wall.
Accelerate again.
Exactly. Yeah. And then agility changes direction, because then it's not, very rarely is it straight line forwards or backwards. It's often 45-degree cuts involving some stutter steps. Maybe you have to throw a fake to throw your opponent, depending on what it might be, depending on your sport as well.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's it.
Heaps of show notes with this one.
Yeah.
They will be linked and collected below in the show notes or above, depending on what platform you're on.
Acceleration is a huge deal, so we've got plenty of resources on it already.
Very nice. And we'll see you guys in a couple of weeks.